One of the things that I've noticed recently when I've been digging in the vault to try to get some of the material that I'm using for shooting videos is that I'm constantly having to move stuff out of the way. When I was in college, I studied human machine systems. That's kind of how human beings fit into complex systems. That can be a computer interface or it can be something like an automobile. And probably because of that, or maybe that's the reason I studied it in school, the idea of having to move junk out of the way every time you want to get to something has always been one of my pet peeves. And believe me, I can be difficult to live with when I'm irritated like that. Maybe you're one of those people who hate moving things, right? If you've got a system in place, you've got something in the way, you've got to move it to get to that thing and back. I don't know, it's a small thing to have to complain about, but it's always driven me crazy. That's really why I kind of decided to make this video. I got so tired of moving this stuff out of the way constantly and never talking about it that I decided I'd talk about it. So that's what this video is going to be about. We're going to be talking about the proof versions of some of the most popular silver bullion stacking coins that are on the market. Are there pluses and minuses to them? Is this something that you should consider stacking? Is this something that you have absolutely no interest in stacking? We're going to take a deep dive into it and take a look at some of the pros and cons, and maybe, just maybe, I'll finally get this stuff out of the way for real and I'll never have to look at it again. If you are new to the channel, my name is Dub C, and I want to thank you for being with me here in my grumpiness too. If you're one of my returning subscribers, thank you guys as always. If this is your first time watching one of my videos, or maybe you've come to a couple, 2 or 3 of my videos, I'd like to encourage you to go ahead and click on that subscription button. Go ahead and become part of this community. It doesn't cost anything to subscribe to the channel. It's just a way to show support. And you guys that are returning subscribers, thank you as always again for being with me. This is going to be good. I promise you're going to enjoy this, even if you're not turned off by the idea of having to constantly move crap out of your way. So let's talk about some of the things that you see here before you. We're going to talk about silver bullion proofs, the pros and cons. If you are new to the channel, I like to begin my videos with a simple disclaimer. That disclaimer is that I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not trying to offer you any kind of financial advice. I'm simply trying to share some of my experience having bought and sold precious metals and rare coins for the last 30 or 40 years. I also like to begin my videos with a couple of concepts that we can kind of work back into the subject matter. Now, this video is going to have a lot of concepts in it, but fortunately, if you are someone who's used to stacking precious metals or coins, you're already going to know a lot of these definitions. This is kind of really more for you guys who are a little bit newer to this and maybe not quite so well versed in what we're going to be talking about. I wanted to give you a little bit of the knowledge that's kind of necessary to evaluate these pieces, but I promise I'm not going to go too heavy into it. The first concept I wanted to propose to you is the idea of a business strike. Now, that's a pretty simple concept to most people. Business strike coins are simply the coins that the mint makes for circulation. It doesn't matter which mint and which country. The coins that you're actually making to be spent, those are called business strikes. Sometimes they're called circulation strikes. I tend to use the expression business strike a little bit more. They mean the same thing. It's just the coins that are used in commerce, right? They're not made for collectors. There's no reason to collect business strikes. Modern business strikes are made in the millions or even hundreds of millions. They're just the coins that we use in everyday commerce. And that's opposed to a proof coin. Proof coin is a little bit more nuanced, so let me take a little bit longer to kind of talk about that. A proof coin is kind of the state of the art. It's the mint master being able to brag about their skills in executing a design. So a proof coin, by definition, are coins struck for collectors by the mint using specially polished dies and planchets. So this is something that is not made for commerce, right? These are never meant to be spent, and that's a very important distinction. I want you to hold on to that one because we're going to come back to that in just a second. What is a die? We talked about the fact that proof coins are made from specially prepared dies, specially polished dies. Dies are the pieces of hardened metal that have, usually hardened steel, have an incuse reverse image etched into them. So, for example, you wouldn't want to strike a coin that looks like a mirror backwards, right? If you're looking at the letters and the words and the figures and the date going backwards. So in order to get the coin to look right when you're looking at it, when it's a finished coin. You actually have to have these images and devices stamped backwards into the dies, and the dies are the stamped pieces of metal, hardened pieces of steel, usually, that come together to strike a coin. I'll show a picture of a die here if you've never seen one before. Some people collect these. The United States Mint offered them for a while after defacing them, right? They grind a big X into them, or they polish them off completely. And I guess it's still kind of an interesting thing to collect, but for me, I'd really want one that looks like the coin, but I understand that there's issues with making counterfeits and stuff like that. So a die, the hardened pieces of metal that come together that actually stamp the design into the coin. And the other word that we use there in that definition for proof is planchet. Planchet is just the blank metal disc that coins are struck from. So it can be made out of copper or bronze or cupro-nickel or steel or silver or gold. It's just a disc of metal that those dies come together to stamp and make a coin. And when you're talking about a proof coin, a coin specially made for collectors with those highly polished dies and specially prepared planchets, that's what differentiates a proof coin from a business strike coin. But it's important to remember that a proof coin is a manufacturing process. Proof is a manufacturing process. It's not a grade, and that's something that new collectors and even people in the general community that aren't part of coin collecting might mistake. They might understand the idea of a proof, but they may think that that's a condition. A business strike can never be a proof. It doesn't matter how pristine it is. We grade coins on a scale of 1 to 70. That's called the Sheldon grading scale. So even a coin that is fresh from the mint, that is absolutely pristine condition, let's call it a mint state 70, it's still never going to be a proof. By the same token, a proof coin can never be a business strike. Even if you were to accidentally spend a proof coin, proofs are graded on that same 1 to 70 scale that regular coins are graded on. So you can actually have a proof that's less than a 70. You can have a proof all the way down to a 1 and anywhere in between. But it's important to note that even a circulated proof coin is never going to be a business strike. It's always going to be a circulated proof. So it's a little bit of a subtle distinction, but I think it's kind of an important one to understand. Proof is a manufacturing process. It's not a condition. The business strike or circulation strike coins are the coins that are made for general circulation, general spending, right? That's your change jar or the change that's in your pocket or your car's center console. Those are our business strike or circulation strike coins. So some examples, sure, why not? So this is an Eisenhower dollar, right? Some people refer to it as a silver dollar, but you can see that copper layer there, right? This is not a silver dollar. This is actually a clad coin. But this is a business strike Eisenhower dollar from the 1970s. Is that right? We got a 1978 here. This is a proof Eisenhower dollar from the bicentennial. You can see the difference, right? You can see how frosty Eisenhower's head is and the lettering is there. You can see the mirror backgrounds there, those fields. Compare that to the business strike. You can see that that is really an entirely different animal, right? It's got nothing to do, one has nothing to do with the other. And it's important to understand that when you're looking at things like proofs versus business strikes, especially if you're looking at something like the Red Book, you can see how the proof mintages are always going to be shown in parentheses there beneath, right? It's the same date, 1986, but one is the business strike and one is the proof mintage. You can see the difference there. The parentheses are a big tip-off. I've got some other examples. Let's take a look at some fun silver pieces, right? This is one of my all-time favorite silver stacking vehicles. You guys know that I love the Libertad, the classic Libertad from Mexico in particular. What do I like about it? Oh, that thick, chunky silver is just a lot of fun, isn't it? You can see the lettering on the edge there. It's a beautiful design front and back. They are a beautiful coin, one of my favorites. And you can tell that this is a beautifully struck coin. You've got that cartwheel luster. You see those spokes that move around as I move this through light. It's a beautiful coin, but this is not a proof. No matter how nice it is, it's still never going to be a proof. This is a Libertad proof. Now you can see the difference there, right? The proof is there on the left side, cat hair, sorry about that, left side, and then you've got the business strike. Let's compare these two. One looks nothing like the other, right? You can see those black and white fields. I'm fond of calling that cameo. That's actually what the graders would call this too. This piece here on the left has got a black and white cameo effect, and you can see those mirrors. Sometimes those mirrors reflect way deep. You see I'm drawing it back and you can still see my fingers and that other Libertad in the mirror. That depth of mirroring has a lot to do with the designation that the third-party graders would give this coin if it were to be submitted for grading. So you've got the proof version here on the left, the circulation strike here on the right. Same thing with the American Silver Eagle. Let's take a look at the American version of it, right? That's definitely a proof. You can see those mirrored fields, the black and white, the cameo, versus the business strike. Now, the business strike is still a beautiful coin. It's got some cartwheel going on too, but it just doesn't compare in terms of the depth of the reflectivity of it, of the mirrored surfaces, of the fine detail that you see there. A proof versus a business strike. We've got the same thing with Canadian. Let's go ahead and take a look at those two since we've got them here. The proof, Canadian maple leaf, beautiful black and white cameo contrast, right? Compare this to another beautiful uncirculated business strike or circulation strike version of the same coin. You can definitely tell that this one is special. This one has been specially prepared, struck multiple times to really bring out the detail. That's the difference between a proof and a business strike. But I'm going to hit you with a conundrum now. Ordinarily, when you're talking about coins used for circulation, and I gave the example of the Eisenhower piece here earlier, the business strike, the circulation strike versus the proof. When you're talking about a business strike, it's designed for circulation, right? That's the ones that the mint is just pumping out by the millions and millions so that they can be spent. The problem is that when we're talking about these silver bullion vehicles, especially these coins, now these are definitely coins. These are made by sovereign countries and they have a face value on them. That's to differentiate them from a round or a bar. The difference is that these were never meant for circulation, right? You could argue that these are made for collectors if you view stackers as a kind of collector. They were certainly never meant to be spent. Nobody would actually spend a silver eagle or a silver maple leaf, not intentionally anyway. So you could argue that the idea, even the concept, the entire idea of making a special collector version of these pieces when they are not ever going to be spent in the first place, it doesn't really make a lot of sense, and that confuses people also. But I think in this case, we just need to go with the flow, right? These would be considered the business strikes, even though they're never going to be spent. We call these NCLT for a reason. These bullion vehicles, these bullion coins that you could buy at most bullion dealers, most coin shops, are called NCLT. That means non-circulating legal tender. They are coins that are never meant to be spent. So how do you make a business strike, a circulation strike that's not meant to be circulated? I know, it's kind of a weird concept. You're going to have to go with me on this one. It's an interesting conundrum. We'll talk a little bit about the pros and the cons of these specially produced versions of the business strikes when it comes to these silver coins. And I want to kind of get your feedback also. I know that this is a little bit strange for some people to be thinking about, especially if you're just a pure bullion stacker. Why would you want these pieces? It's a good question. I hope to kind of address that in this video, and maybe we'll start a little bit of a conversation about it a little bit later. We can get this going and decide whether or not you think that this is appropriate things for you to be stacking. So let's talk about some of the pros, the benefits of these beautiful but unusual silver proofs versions of these common silver stacking vehicles. Typically, they have much smaller mintages, and I'll go ahead and I'll show a picture of that red book that I was just showing here so we can follow along with me. We're looking at the 1986 Silver American Eagle, the business strike. That's a really common one, the one that you see here before you in the larger pile. 5,393,005. The proof version of that coin, 1,446,778. Remember, I said that you're looking at the parentheses, the figure in parentheses, to figure out what the proof is. That may have been confusing you for quite some time. Now you know the answer, why there are two mintages shown for each year and why one of them is shown in parentheses. It's because that's the proof mintage. It's important to note that even the United States Mint doesn't include these mintages together, right? They don't blend them together. They keep them separate. The Red Book keeps them separate. What does that tell you? To me, it tells me that they really aren't the same thing. They are entirely different. They're struck sometimes at entirely different facilities, even not just the minting method. We talked about the specially prepared dyes, the specially prepared planchets. So often they are produced in an entirely different facility. So if the mint and the red book and every other source is keeping these separate, then I think you have a really solid argument that these are not the same thing. They are definitely different things altogether. Interesting, right? So we've got the mintages there to prove it. Let's look at the 1987, the business strike, 11,442,335 versus the proof version from 1987, fewer than 1,904,732. So there are fewer than 1/10 as many of the proofs made as there are the business strike. Does that mean it's something that's a little bit more interesting, a little bit more scarce, a little bit more valuable? It might, and we're going to address that a little bit later when we get to the negatives of these things. But it's interesting to note, right, that often the mintages on the proofs are a fraction of what they are on the business strike versions of these coins. I think they're beautiful. That's another benefit of these, another pro. These are really beautiful. I talked about this being kind of the mint masters showing off their minting skills when it comes to these coins. They really put the effort into it, to engraving these dies, to polishing these dies, to watching them as they're minted, to make sure that they are as flawless as they can make them. Note that I didn't say that they're going to be flawless, because in any kind of industrial minting capacity, you're always going to have issues. But I think they really, it doesn't matter which mint it is around the world, they really go out of their way to try to make these proof pieces the very finest quality that they can possibly make them. So if you like the design of the maple leaf, of the silver eagle, of the Libertad, or any other major bullion coin, having a proof version that really is the highest quality example of that design is a benefit. I think that that's definitely a plus. They're struck usually with higher pressure. The mint usually strikes them multiple times to really bring out that design and really bring on those mirrors. So it's really kind of the state of the art, the very highest quality that can be made. And I think that that's definitely a benefit. When these are minted often, and you'll see it in all three of these examples here, all three of these have this really nice plastic rigid holder. Some call these an airtight, some call these a cointainer, as I get my fingerprint right across it, right? So this is something that really protects the coin. This rigid plastic holder does a nice job of protecting the coin. You don't see that with the business strike pieces. They're often just coming in bulk. Often they come in a tube or a roll, that kind of thing. So if you want these things to be as pristine as possible, you're also getting this nice container that holds them. If you are looking at these pieces, you'll also notice that each one of them comes in what we call a clamshell case. A clamshell, because it kind of works like a clamshell, right? They have a nice crushed velvet liner. This box is usually kind of velvet. This is a nice metal emblem that's on the outside of the American piece. You can see this decal pressed into the silk or satin version of the lid. So this is a nice holder. They don't just come in this inner attractive box. Often you'll find that they come in an outer rigid box too, with kind of details. And all of these examples that you see here come with a certificate of authenticity. You can see it here on the Canadian one. I actually made a video about this. I'll put a link down below. This is the Mexican certificate of authenticity that comes with that Libertad. Nice to note that the Libertad pieces actually have a serial number on them too, right? So this is a pretty limited release for the Libertad, and it comes with an outer case as well. Same deal with all of these. They all have an outer case, they all have an inner case, they all have that plastic cointainer, airtight, if you will. So you're going to have a better protection for your coin versus the business strike. These pieces rarely come with any kind of packaging. It's my understanding that even the modern silver maple leafs don't come with these individual vinyl flips anymore. They're all kind of bulk packaged in tubes. So they're a little bit more careful when they're leaving the mint. And they also, I think, often, and I want to make sure that this is really clear here, not always, and I'll go into detail here, they often have at least the higher possibility of a numismatic increase in value. We call that extrinsic value sometimes, that collector value. And I think it's important to note that not all the time, right? Nobody's got a crystal ball. And as I'm fond of saying, that whole past performance is no indication of future results. When you're talking about one of these pieces, just because it's fancier doesn't mean that it's going to increase in value over time. But take, for example, the 1995 West Point American Silver Eagle. I think that was the first year that we made a Silver Eagle at West Point, at the new mint at West Point, New York. And because of it, the mintage was quite small. Relatively speaking, we'll address that a little bit later too. The mintage 30,125, to me, that's not that small. But it's all about supply and demand, right? If you've got a great big demand for something that has a small mintage, you're probably going to drive prices up. What's the value of the 1995 West Point Proof Silver Eagle? They're selling for over $10,000. I'll show an example right now on eBay. So you can see that even though this coin was probably not that expensive back in 1995, probably less than $100 to buy. If you're one of the lucky 30,000 people that got one of these, $10,000 now is an asking price for these pieces, and I think that they sell in that region too. Important to note, not everything is going to increase, but wow, I can't think of another example of a business strike of any of these pieces that even gets close to approaching that. So it's a possibility. Negatives. There are some negatives. They have a higher initial price, right? When you're buying these pieces, even if you're buying the business strike, the commercial strike, or the circulation strike version of these pieces in the same year that they are minted, and that seems to be when the prices, the premiums for them are the highest. If you're buying them in the year that they're made, often you won't find a premium on these that's more than $3 or $4, maybe $5. Sometimes it can be a little bit more than that. Premium, once again, the amount that you have to pay over and above the value of the silver for each of these. But that's not the case with these proof pieces, right? This packaging, this beauty, this careful handling comes with a price. And right now, the American Silver Eagle selling for $95 from the U.S. Mint. You can buy that directly from the U.S. Mint. It's going to run you $95 plus shipping. So if silver is around $25 an ounce, the circulation strike may cost you $27, $28, $29, but this is going to cost you $95 plus shipping. That's a pretty substantial increase in the cost of that premium. So you're not getting a free lunch. You have to pay for all of that additional packaging, handling, and beauty. I think that's definitely negative. Let's take a look at the 2018 Silver Eagle. The United States Mint's website keeps a lot of their product SKUs live even after they've sold out of them. In this case, you can actually see the 2018 is still something that is pictured on the U.S. Mint's website. When this was issued, it was a $95 issue price as well. Right now, you can find the 2018 Silver Eagle with all the bells and whistles, all that extra packaging. There's a picture of the certificate of authenticity. This is the outer box, the inner box, all that kind of stuff. You can find this with all of its extra accoutrement, those COAs and everything else. There's an example right now that just sold for $55. So it's approaching half as much as the issue price, that $95 price. And you'd think that, it's been, 5-6 years from that 2018, from when it was released. You would think that it would have increased in value at least a little bit. Not in this case. In this case, it actually dropped by almost half. So not everything is going to be, hitting it out of the park like that 1995 West Point piece. Important to keep that in mind too. Lower demand. So we mentioned before that these proof pieces often have a mintage that is a fraction of the circulation or business strike mintages. And you would think on the surface that means that these are more collectible, they're more scarce. But the truth is that these mints would be cranking these out if they knew that they could sell them, because obviously they sell for a much higher price. So the truth is that there probably is a lower demand for the proof versions of these pieces than there is for the business strikes. That seems a little bit strange, but consider that often these pieces, and I'm talking about the proofs again, with their fancy box and their beautiful reflective surfaces and frosty devices, these are often given as gifts to people outside of the numismatic community. This is a great way to celebrate a date, if it's a christening or a bar mitzvah or a Christmas or an anniversary, a birthday, that kind of thing. So they are often given by people who are at least a little bit more familiar with stacking precious metals than the average person. And it's a nice gift to give somebody outside of the numismatic community. You open that box and you think that this is special. This is really a pretty thing. And I agree, it is. But it's important to note that the demand doesn't seem to be driven so much by the numismatic community, which means it's really not something that's highly collectible in most cases versus a typical business strike that may be collected by people within our community a little bit more. I know, again, a subtle distinction, but I think it's important to understand that there is probably lower demand for these. There is also probably less attrition. I know you guys know that I constantly harp on attrition, but believe me, it's kind of an important thing to consider. Now, we're talking about these business strike pieces. These are not handled very carefully, right? You see me pick these up, and yes, oh my goodness, I actually touch those with my fingertips. I know a lot of people are clutching pearls about that, but the truth is that for the most part, these are AUBU, low MS60 condition. They're made in the millions, and they are kept pretty much in rolls, tubes like these. They're going to get a little bit of wear just from being tossed around a little bit, right? Knocked around a little bit. It's not unusual to see these pieces that are sold at your local dealership for $1 or $2 over melt when they've been knocked around a lot, right? You'll find pieces that actually have lots of contact marks, bag marks, or whatever you want to call it. But that's probably not the case with these proof pieces because they are released in those airtights, because they are kept in these rigid holders, right? These cardboard boxes. They probably are never going to see very much, if any, kind of contact marks. I'm reluctant to call it wear because I associate wear with actually circulating these pieces. Clearly, none of these pieces are going to circulate. But I think you can make the argument that these pieces that are highly protected in their cointainers, their airtights, their rigid plastic or clamshell cases and the cardboard boxes, once these are issued by the mint, and they're handled very carefully at the mint as well, but once they leave the mint, the chance of them actually degrading for any reason is very small. You rarely see what we would call an impaired proof being offered anywhere. It's something that a kid got their hands on and popped open in show and tell in class and dropped it on the floor. It just doesn't happen that often. So because of that, I think that you're experiencing less attrition with these pieces. When they leave the mint, they are probably somewhere in that proof 68, proof 69, proof 70, those top 3 grades in terms of condition. And they rarely will decrease in grade from that 68, 69, 70. It just doesn't happen very often. So because of that, you have a lot less attrition by percentage than you would with the circulation strikes. Remember, these pieces issued in the 80s or 90s when silver was relatively cheap to what it is now. If you're the kind of person that likes to pour your own silver bars, or if you have a jewelry making business, or if you needed this for industry for any reason, remember this is 99.9% pure silver. It wasn't an unusual thing to get these guaranteed high quality silver pieces to use in whatever project you had. Yeah, a lot of these probably did get melted. They got lost. They were melted down, made into something else. But if you're the kind of person that needed silver and you went to a local coin shop to get it, you probably weren't buying these proofs in these fancy boxes, right? So the percentage of attrition lost, the pieces lost through attrition for these pieces, probably considerably less in terms of percentages than these circulation strikes. I've got nothing to go on but my gut when it comes to that kind of thing, but it makes sense, right? You wouldn't probably melt down a proof silver eagle if you just needed an ounce of silver. You'd buy a silver eagle. So I think that there's probably less attrition there too. And one other negative, and I suppose you could look at the attrition as being a positive or negative. When you're looking for that appreciation in value, I would say that the less attrition means that the less chance these are going to go up in value. That's why I bring it up. The last thing really has to do with the whole reason that I'm shooting this video in the first place. The fact that I keep on having to move these silly boxes out of my way every time I want to get my hands on something that I think is maybe a little bit more interesting. is because these take up a lot of space. Now, if you've watched my channel before, especially if you watch the video on like the Canadian set that you see here, I was a big fan of that OGP, original government packaging. Original packaging, I think, is important to the integrity, the quality, the history of the piece. Sometimes it really does kind of get in your way. And I just did a quick volumetric study of these two pieces. We're going to look at one of these. So if my calculations are correct, length and width and height, talking about the number of square inches that this takes place, this is a single American Silver Eagle proof. You know, this is the same kind of a deal that you see here in front of you. This piece, about 9.62 cubic inches of space. That doesn't sound like very much. But compare it to this entire tube of 20 American Silver Eagle business strikes. Length times width times height gives us 8.42 inches. So this entire tube takes up considerably less space than this single proof. Now, that may not bother you if you don't have your pieces stored somewhere like a safe deposit box where you've got to pay annual rent. But for me, especially when it comes to these pieces, yeah, that does get to be kind of a drag, and it can cost you. So not only are you paying more for these pieces in the first place, but it could cost you even more to store these pieces. So I would see that as a negative, and again, that's what prompted this video in the first place. I talked before about the fact that these are probably not often bought by people within our community. I don't know, is that true? Do you buy these? I know a lot of people collect annual pieces. There's nothing wrong with that. But I got to tell you, with the 5 or 6 or 8 proof sets that you see here, the American Silver Eagle proofs in particular, I have never bought one of those. Those are always given to me as gifts by people who know that I'm a coin collector, and I appreciate it, right? It's still kind of a neat thing, but I would never have gone out of my way to buy one of these. It's just not something that I collect. It's something that I kind of have to keep with my stack because I'm not going to get rid of a gift. Important to note that this is probably not something that a lot of coin collectors really go for. So we've got some pros, we got some cons. Delighted to hear your opinion about those. Do you disagree or do you agree with any of those points? Can you think of any other reasons that's a positive for collecting these proof versions of these typical, more commonly found silver bullion business strike coins? I'll give you some suggestions if this is something that you've decided that you want to pursue, and this will just kind of augment it a little bit. First off, I want to say don't feel obligated to buy these. I agree that these can be very beautiful. That is a really neat thing. If you love the American Silver Eagle design, there's nothing wrong with getting, like I said, kind of that state of the art, the highest potential that these pieces can possibly have. So if you like that, there's nothing wrong with that. But I don't think that I would feel obligated to do that. I don't think that I would feel that pressure to buy these pieces. I think it's important, like we talked before, to examine those mintages if this is something that you want to pursue. Now, there is no guarantee that a low mintage is going to translate to higher value over time, but I think it's at least one of the barometers that you can use if this is something you want to do. And you don't have to learn the entire mintage of an entire series to benefit from looking at those mintages. If you've got a copy of a red book, if you've got one with you, and most qualified coin dealers, most good coin dealers are going to have a red book sitting on their counter that you can reference. You don't have to find the lowest mintage. Just find a mintage that is relatively low compared to other mintages, right? That's kind of how I do it. If I find something with a mintage of 10 million and I find most of the other coins issued in that series have a mintage of 1 million, I would probably pass on that 10 million. I don't have to find the absolute lowest mintage. I just want to find something that's maybe, the bottom third in terms of mintages. I think that that's probably a smart thing to do if mintages are a concern to you. If it's possible, if you decide that you want to stack these pieces, I think it's beneficial to go for that original government packaging, right? You want that outer box, you want that inner box, the clamshell, you want that certificate of authenticity, you want all of these pieces together if this is something that you want to pursue. Make sure that you've got all of those components if you are buying this. And if you are buying these in the original packaging, take a second to really examine the obverse and the reverse. Make sure that this isn't the kind of coin that was popped out of the rigid plastic holder, this rigid plastic case, and got a big thumbprint across it. You don't want that. So if you're going to be buying this in the original packaging, You want that original packaging to be complete with all the different pieces, and you definitely want to take a second to examine the front and the back of the coin and make sure that it's never been popped open and dropped on the floor, because that would defeat the entire purpose. You definitely don't want that. The alternative to that, if you decide that you want to stack these pieces, is to go with a piece that's already been certified. This is a little bit more of an advanced topic, and this has a lot to do with Dub C's feelings about certification services. In my opinion, modern proofs should never be purchased in a grade less than 70 or 69. I don't even like a 68 grade, and that's because I think the real hardcore collectors and even the investors in silver coins would not consider a coin with a grade of 68 or below to be something desirable when we're talking about modern proofs in particular. And it's also important to recognize that a lot of the third-party graders use designations to talk about those cameo and deep mirrors that we've seen here. In NGC, I think they're often called ultra cameo, and in PCGS, they're called deep cameo. This is an example of the 1983 Mexican Libertad proof. We talked about the mintages before of that 1995 W Silver Eagle, 30,125. This 1983 Mexican Libertad proof, the mintage of 998. That's it. That's all the pieces that were made. In fact, there are only 7 that have ever been graded Deep Cameo 69. You can see this one actually is PCGS Proof 69 DCAM. That stands for Deep Cameo. Only 7 of these have ever been graded in this condition. But it's got that Deep Cameo designation. You often find proofs that have a cameo designation. Sometimes you even find proofs that don't even have a cameo. So you've got proof, cameo, deep cameo. You want the highest possible quality. You want that ultra cameo from NGC. You want the deep cameo from PCGS. If you're talking about getting one that's already been certified. And you want one that's a 70, ideally, maybe a 69. Like I said, this one's a 69, but there's never been a 70 graded in this series. So 69 is absolutely the pop top. That's the size you can go with this one, at least to date. So I would also limit myself to PCGS, NGC, or CAC. I wouldn't go with any other certification service, especially if you're buying one of the more expensive versions of these coins. Other certification services do certify proof pieces, but in my opinion, that grade really, really counts when it comes to modern proof coins. You want that 70, you want that 69, and you want that just from the absolute top tier third-party graders. Anything else, I think, is probably going to be shooting you in the foot in the long run. A little bit of a controversial take, but remember, Dub C's been doing this for quite a while. So, original government packaging that is complete. Examine that coin to make sure that it's absolutely flawless, or if you're going to buy a piece that's certified, make sure NGC, PCGS, or CAC, make sure it's a 70, ideally, maybe a 69, but nothing less than that, and get that deep cameo or ultra cameo designation as well. The benefit to having those pieces in slabs is that they take up a lot less room, right? If we're talking about the difference between just a coin and its slab, you can tell that this is something that you could probably stack 5 of these for the same amount of space. That's why I like the idea of these pieces in slabs sometimes. I would say also, if you're going to go for these pieces, look for the low premiums. We talked before about how when you're buying these pieces from the mint, you're looking at, wow, a $50 premium, maybe buying them. But if you're buying them on the secondary market, you're cutting that premium in half. Honestly, I think even that premium's probably too much for me. If you're buying something that is not the current year, remember, current year always seems to be kind of the highest price. That's when they're in the most demand. Look for a piece that's a few years older and then try to get that premium down as low as you can. Maybe your local dealer's got some of these. They know they don't move very quickly. See if you can bring that premium down lower. You're not going to get it for $3 or $4 over the value of the silver like you do with these business strike pieces. But I wouldn't buy one of these with a premium of maybe $50, but I would consider them with a premium of maybe 10 or 15, maybe 20 if it was nice enough. Look at those premiums. Try to maximize the amount of silver and collectability that you're getting for the lowest premium. We always do that, right? That's always something you should pursue, but I think it's really important for these proof pieces. And finally, And this is also just kind of Dubsy's opinion about that. If this is the dinner, right, you're stacking these pieces, these business strike pieces, these circulation strike pieces, even though they're never going to be circulated. This is what you're making your meal out of. This is the dessert. These proof pieces with their fancy boxes and all the kind of things like that, that's really the thing you want in moderation. It's just like a diet. You don't want the junk food making up the majority of what you're eating over the course of the day. This is really kind of the cherry on top. There's nothing wrong with having a couple of nice examples of these really, really beautiful designs, but I don't know that I would make it a very important part of my stack. It's one of the reasons why I've got so few of these pieces and quite a few more of the business strike, the circulation strike pieces. Dessert rather than dinner. That's it. Finally got that off my chest, right? The fact that I'm constantly having to dig through all of these boxes of proof pieces that take up so much space in the vault whenever I'm trying to get stuff to make videos. Maybe get that out of my hair, wash away those demons finally. What do you think about that? What are your thoughts about these pieces? Do you stack these proof pieces with their beautiful hardwood cases and their certificates of authenticity and their outer boxes and their outer sleeves? Does it take up too much space? I get it either way. You know, I'm a big fan of original government packaging, but I want it to be kind of an intentional thing that you're doing logically. Don't just stack empty boxes for no reason. That's a pain in the butt. Do you feel like there's no place in your stack for these pieces? You stack for silver ownership, right? Why would I want to spend a lot of premium on pieces that are just going to take up more space? I get that too, really do. But I'd like to hear your thoughts about it. Let me know what your thoughts are. And I encourage everybody else who's making comments, go ahead and look at other comments, see if they agree with you or disagree with you. I think it's an important thing to get kind of the temperature of the community when we're talking about these kind of esoteric subjects. If you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, please go ahead and subscribe. Love to have you be part of the community. Again, it doesn't cost anything, just a way to show support for this channel, and I would really appreciate it. If you've got questions about any of these pieces, leave the question down below. If you have suggestions for any other video topics that you'd like to see me make, whether it's precious metals or rare coins, leave that comment down below too, and I'll see if I've got the knowledge and the examples so we can make a video, maybe a couple of videos out of it. And if we do, I'll definitely give you a big shout out for suggesting it. And as always, thank you for allowing me to be a part of your journey as we go deeper into the world of coins and physical precious metals.